Hello, everyone. A little bit more. We just did like this whole energy pumping exercise. All right. So today we're going to talk about importance of unlearning in user research. Preparing this talk has been deeply personal and reflective. You need me to be louder? Okay. Shall I use that then? Hello. Is this better? Awesome. So, preparing this talk has been a deeply personal reflection for me because it. This has a weird lag. Sorry. This is. I'll manage. Um, because it gave me a chance to look back, reflect, all the things that I had assumed, and then all the things I unlearned along the way. Before we jump into the talk, a little bit about myself. Mm, the top picture is me at work. Um, I am. I prefer calling myself a UX practitioner because my journey started with being a front-end developer in about 99, 2000, when we didn't really have like a research field in India. But I was always intrigued by, the power of publishing on the internet, and having spent early part of my career in marketing companies, sometimes even working with people who were designing clickbait marketing, it really made me curious about the psychology of the end users, which is how I got into the space. So I've worn multiple hats. Front-end developer, then what they used to call an information architect, founded and led user experience teams, and currently I'm at my role in Microsoft, where I think 7, 8 years back, it was my first time being in a true research team and understanding what, just being a user experience researcher meant. But it was also a revelation that research cannot exist in a silo. So here I'm back again doing what I've been doing on and off, managing a team of design and research. On the personal front, I am the co-founder of my family along with my husband, a head chef, counselor, and vacation planner. All the titles I thoroughly enjoy. Um, So before we get on the presentation, I'd like a show of hands. How many people here are into user research? Let's start with that. Well, I think most of us. How many of y'all have had any exposure to enterprise user research? Okay, that's about 50%, right? The reason I ask that is because enterprise user research is a slightly different ball game if you think about the different types of researchers out there. What I mean by enterprise is when you have large orgs and you have complex enterprise systems, there's a lot of system connectivity involved, right? And changing one little thing can have a magnitude of changes everywhere else. Your job as a user researcher becomes slightly tricky. Add to that, a lot of big companies who own these enterprise solutions and products will have a lot of legacy um, architecture. They'll also have legacy people and legacy mindset, right? And sort of addressing all of this coming together requires a whole new level of thinking beyond what textbooks would have taught us. So that's some of the flavor that you're going to get into this presentation. Um, so yesterday when I was combing through, old photographs, I got this very interesting quote that I would have collated some time back. I'm sorry, the clicker is giving me a little trouble. Can you go next? Oh, there? Okay. Um, so I don't know if you folks can read it at the back. I'm just going to read it to you because it's worth reading. And this fits the description of enterprise systems in large orgs. Unaddressed, the ruptures and diagonal cracks will not fix themselves. The toxins will not go away, but rather will spread, leach, and mutate as they already have. When people live in an old house, they come to adjust to the idiosyncrasies and outright dangers skulking in old structure. They put buckets under a wet ceiling, prop up groaning floors, learn to step over the rotting wood tread in the staircase. The awkward becomes acceptable, and the unacceptable becomes merely inconvenient. Live with it long enough, and the unthinkable becomes normal. Exposed over the generations, we learn to believe that the incomprehensible is the way that life is supposed to be. Unfortunately, this is the truth of a lot of the internal digital ecosystems in large enterprises. We may be shipping products worth like billions and billions of dollars, but this is what our internal systems look like. Um, Add to this, budgets for modernization are limited. These teams are extremely ROI driven. Teams have to deliver quick results, even though the movement of change is very slow, right? It's like turning an entire big ship. Um, and when research is engaged in such situations, it's actually hope. Why is it hope? Because these teams could have very well gone, without engaging in any research or design, right? Traditionally, they have been very engineering led. So we love to blame the PMs and the developers, but when, as a researcher, you are involved in this kind of an intricate space and the onus of driving change is placed on you, it calls for us to applaud the vision of the leadership, right? Then what is our job as researchers? So with all of these constraints, it's important to reinvent ourselves, right? We cannot work in the prescriptive textbook ways. We have to do it by being scrappy, agile, yet rigorous. So what I'm going to talk about is the learnings that I had, the unlearnings that I had when I was put in this kind of a space 7-8 years back. Four key learnings that we're going to talk about. One is go deep to keep that seat at the table. Bullshit will be called out fast. Second, insights are everywhere if you look for them. A lot of times, like even now, we meet people who'll be like, oh, I'm a designer, I'm a user researcher, but you know what, we don't have access to users, right? Insights are everywhere if you look for them. The third and a very interesting phenomena, I don't know if it happens across the industry, but especially in these enterprisey kind of groups, right? When you announce a research, everybody wants to be a part of it. So crowd management becomes a real challenge. And lastly, and I can't emphasize this enough, you are not going to be a great researcher if you don't embrace the product maker mindset. We have to think of ourselves as product makers because our job doesn't end with conducting and publishing a research study. It starts there. And the real proof of the pudding is the impact that we are able to make to the products, consequently the people. So let's jump in. So we often speak of not getting a seat at the table, right? So times have changed. Like, of course, when you're paying good amount of money to set up a team, hire a research design lead, of course, you're creating a seat at the table. But that seat at the table could be like a baby seat, right? Like often it'll be condescending, you're just expected to be there. Maybe not even expected to contribute much to the so-called business discussions, right? But this is really where we have to make a change because I think we are the only people in the room who are not doing it for profit or for business, but there is that altruism of representing someone in the room who's not there, right? So the onus of responsibility on our shoulders is really very high. How do we do that? So two parts to it. One is, let's say you join a new company, right? And the domain is very enterprisey, complex, and so you're all poised to get started. Don't jump right in, right? Spend some time doing your homework. The first thing, and this is often a wake-up call to many of us, is that our insights matter more than our grades. Ripple alluded to it earlier, right? No one cares about your methodology. Nobody cares about your puritanism. What people care is what do you bring to the table, and especially in these, enterprisey kind of ecosystems. Remember, there are people who have been there for years. They know the nuts and bolts of the systems. They have seen a lot of effort start with a great amount of enthusiasm and fail. It is natural for cynicism to set in. And then there is someone who's been a month in the company and starts spewing gyan. It's not going to do you a favor, right? So take the time to understand. Yes, there will be breadth, there will be complexities, but don't let that scare you. Ideally, and this is what I tell my team when any new person in the team joins here, take one area, but go really, really deep, because there's going to be a ton of knowledge out there, right? That you can mine from, that is probably lying unused. Talk to people, cultivate your friends, do your homework. Um, what is also important is find SMEs who understand the space. They will be your greatest allies. And finally, remember that responsibility that you have to be the voice of people in the room. Don't do them a disservice by making it easy for people to dismiss. And people will dismiss you, right? Because you're a threat. You're a threat to existing mindsets. Like it or not, it is going to be political. The sooner you acknowledge and embrace it, the better. After you jump in. So again, like a mistake that I've seen a lot of rookie researchers do is that we get very excited. Oh my God, all these learnings, these users are so frustrated, the systems are so bad. Yes, they are, but not for people who've spent decades in that space, right? So we have to be pragmatic about how we frame our narratives. Ideally, use your managers, use your ecosystem to sound off your early findings. Don't get carried away, because remember, we are all people, and even your end users who talk to you in these spaces are probably people who have been with the company for long, and they know exactly how to play you, right? So sound of these findings with a trusted network, your managers, your allies. Second, resist the temptation to add everything that you've learned in these research studies. Be precise and succinct in calling just top 2, 3 things, because if they stick, you've won, right? The other thing, there's no one size that fits all. When we publish, right, often we put a lot of pain in creating a 50-100 slider, and then we carry it with us and we want to evangelize it. But different people will have different expectations of learning from your report, right? So you have to have exec level presentations, you have to have some really deep ones for your devs and PMs. Now, this is another mistake that a lot of people do, right? Because the guidance is, don't bog it down with details. That's great for your exec level, but your PM and your dev teams will be very dismissive if you don't tell them precisely the details are, right? It's not right to just use, high-level, fancy-sounding words like things don't match the user's mental model. Users are very frustrated. Arey, but Q. And unfortunately, a lot of researchers stumble when it comes down to giving the details. So strike that balance. Build on your studies, because if it's your first study, there are going to be a lot of new areas that's going to unravel, right? Sometimes we may think that we've learned it all, but it's probably tip of the iceberg. So acknowledge that, be humble. The last one might seem a little weird, like, why is this here? Because it's pretty obvious. But again, when you're in these enterprise ecosystems, you're talking to your end users who are employees, who are basically told by their managers that, hey, spend 1 hour in this research study. There's no compensation or anything, right? And we are so wrapped up in our work that we forget that research is a very selfish act, right? So the least we can do is thank the people, loop in their managers. These are like really small things, but remember, if you're there for the long run, if it's a system that you're going to unravel over the next 5, 7 years, these people are going to be your allies. So start building on that. The second one, insights are everywhere if you look for them. See, things are becoming a little challenging now. Budgets are being reduced, right? I mean, it's all very real. Travel is constrained. Um, Even we don't go to field as often as we did, like pre-COVID, right? Um, so how do you do research? Most of it is online meetings, Teams discussions, all of that. You can do great research with that, especially if the focus is like a tool or an application, all of that. But find opportunities to go meet your end users in the place where they are. And no one will pay you for this, by the way, right? It's something that has to be intrinsic. Like Uday was saying, be curious. And if you're curious enough, this will happen. So here are some small stories that I wanted to share. The thing on the left is when I was a researcher with Microsoft and I was researching the sales ecosystem. We have a Dynamics product of Microsoft, and there's a version of that called MSX that we use internally for our sellers. Now, my team was chartered with, figuring out the efficiencies of that product. We realized that, like, a lot of people were spending a lot of time doing that paperwork instead of, going out on the field and selling. So this was at one of the seller conferences where we set up a research booth, because that was one place where the sales folks from all over the world would converge. So we had a booth set up. We invited people to give feedback, tell us what their top pain points were. There were some little games that we had created to elicit this kind of feedback. And there was this really interesting gentleman who walks up and he says that I am a seller from South Africa. And we're talking about 2018, 2019. All of the applications that you design are designed for the desktop or the laptop, right? Which assumes that we have Wi-Fi all the time, because that's what we had learned from our business stakeholders, right? Because the business stakeholders were catering primarily to the audiences of the West, where most revenue was coming from. And I'm a little ashamed to say that even in India, we had the same situation back there, right? 2017, 2018, we didn't have Wi-Fi everywhere. So what they do is, most of their transaction work, right? If they have to go make a CRM entry on the road, they'd use their phone and not their laptop or desktop. And that was, like a light bulb going on, right? Like, what are we doing? Because these applications are so complex and so many forms to fill and all, we had just taken the easy route that we'll not design for mobile phones. But this insight really opened eyes. The second one, again, this was when we were doing online research. So I live in Hyderabad, but I'm from Bombay. And couple of times a year, I go meet my parents there. We have a sales office there where a lot of these sellers sit. So I just went to do a courtesy visit to one of the sellers who had been helping me understand the domain. I said, I'm coming to Bombay, I'll anyways meet you, right? Again, the idea was to create opportunity to understand how they actually work, because otherwise they're just an icon on Teams. And what was interesting was all these theories about collaboration, water cooler chats that we had in people. I walked to an empty office. People don't come to office, right? So all of the things that they were talking about how it was in the earlier days, but now that a lot of people are on the field, a lot of people are working from home, there are planned coffee dates that people meet on, right, as a group, and that's when they talk to each other. It was a very interesting insight, because it made us question the fundamentals of, what we had assumed to be a type of collaboration we had imagined in our head, right? People are constantly bumping into each other hallways and stuff like that. The third one is actually very dear to my heart. So earlier I spoke about the seller insights, right? And the CRM tool that we were trying to optimize, all of that. So a lot of focus was going in figuring out where are the clicks going, why there are 5 steps to do this when this could be done in 1 step, so on and so forth. Um, I was doing this research in Redmond with our sales folks there, and in Redmond, Microsoft has a network of shuttles, right, that you used to get from one place to the other. I hopped onto one of the shuttles and started, struck up a conversation with the person sitting next to me. He was a seller. And while we were in that coach, 15-20 minutes ride, we ended up having a very philosophical discussion on sales. The insight from that conversation, which changed my thinking around the work that we were doing, was our job as sellers is to sell. CRM tools are just a system of records, which are basically used to keep the management informed. So we are taking all the effort to make sure that our management and leadership are informed, the right financial projections are going out there to the stock market, all of that. But what are we getting in return for that? We're just doing the admin work, right? So that led to a conversation around value. Because right now, all these systems were one-way system where they were ingesting effort, but the output was no value at all. The seller's values stayed in Excel because that's where they were, documenting their sales, figuring out how much incentives they're going to get, all of that, none of which our CRM system was doing. And that led to a very fundamental reframing of the problem, right? So, moral of the story, in our hybrid world, serendipity is the collateral damage. Everything is a team's call, right? Either find time to create these encounters or find deeper ways to engage, even in the online mode. The last story I have is of a diary study that I had to do with some of our licensing experts, which is a very, very technical domain. And by just doing a half an hour, 45-minute show on tell, you cannot understand what they're doing because you have no idea of even the language and terminology that they use in their day-to-day work, right? So one of the ways we sort of cracked that was we asked them if they'd keep a diary. They said they were too busy. We said, fine, let's just connect for 10 minutes at the end of your day. We will write the diary for you. You just tell us what happened. And those conversations, day on day, 10 minutes, built to such a great rapport that they became our allies in the research, right? So be creative, treasure people, and find ways to connect with them. The third insight, everyone will want to be a part of your field study. So I was the lead researcher there, and I'm there, right? And that, unfortunately, is how it is, because you're going to have heads of various departments who want to know what's going on the ground. You're going to have their lead PMs, their lead developers, like really higher up people, right? And you're like one measly researcher in that room who's actually trying to get a job done and remind people that it's not a picnic. So how do you manage in such situations? Because if you do end up in spaces like this, these are the things that you'll probably not learn in a research school, right? So here are a few examples again. So what could start as unnecessary distractions, noise, and stakeholder management? Yes, you can leverage it to your advantage. How? By doing a couple of things. First of all, remember that you have the power of the collective, which is yours to leverage for that time, right? So you harness it. You also keep control with processes and artifacts. Establish accountability to document outcomes. And this is easier said than done, right? Because if you want people to turn in your notes every day, end of the day, you better keep it strict. And then set up like a debrief cadence for the duration of the meeting. So all of these sound very tactical, but these are all really your frameworks when you have everybody leaning in, everybody excited, and then you don't know what to do with these people. So you have either two options. One is like do a really bad job of your research because you're trying to keep everybody happy, or use that energy constructively. Here are a few tips to remember. when you get to that point that you have to be a researcher who is leveraging the power of crowds to conduct research. So first, this is not going to fit all the contexts, right? If it's a more transactional kind of a study, you can delegate it, you can federate it. But if you're studying deep user behaviors, for example, then this model does not fit. So there will be temptation to, oh, it's worked so well in this case, let me like use this going forward, but that's not going to work. Um, Second is when you're training this group of your co-facilitators or co-moderators, remember you're not here to teach them research, right? You are here to get a job done. Um, so identify the tasks that you're comfortable delegating and then practice, practice, practice. As the lead orchestrator, you will have to do a lot of non-researchy things like creating schedules, mapping people to sessions, mapping sessions to templates, all of that, right? Keeping people accountable. Finally, establish the definition of done. Because what will happen in real life is, there's 3 days of interviews, everybody's in, everybody's charged, and people disappear. Because they've kept, their own work on hold, right, for 3 days. So that's not going to work. So you have to absolutely keep people accountable. And last but not the least, enable people to have fun to do it. See, again, the same people are who are also going to uplift our insights and convert them into actions, right? So you have to, as an experienced designer, think about how you might make the experience memorable for them, right? I mean, you just can't have your strict school teacher hat on, that is needed, but also enable people to have fun. This is the last one. How do you embrace the product maker mindset? So the first thing that you do is learn the language that your stakeholders will understand and appreciate. And scorecards can be an excellent way to do that, right? Different types of scorecards. Now, as qualitative researchers, we sometimes shy away from this because, our research studies are like 7, 8 people, small sample sizes. How do I create that into a scorecard? There is a middle ground, right? You don't have to make it into an absolute quantitative scorecards, but you can think of designing different levels, different ranges, not absolute numbers, absolute percentages. In some cases, understanding how the time taken for a task ties to the dollar value of that resource. These are all small but impactful ways to have your research create an impact. The other one is, again, as researchers, sometimes I think we have to be reminded a little bit, is in UXR, that first 2 letters is user experience, right? Which means that even our reports have to be user-friendly. You can't just, I'm sorry to use the words, but vomit all over it and then expect people will appreciate it. Appreciate the effort that you've put in collecting data. You have to absolutely make it consumable. So think about frameworks, think about visuals, think about how you are going to ensure that your key insights are coming to the forefront and sticking with the people, right? That one visual that they should carry with them when they walk out of the room, that one insight, that one anecdote, because that's your win, not like the 20 things that you're going to talk about. And then finally, bring in your team to co-create and build on your insights. So what we do in Microsoft is we do something called as framing and shaping, which is a kind of adapted design thinking workshop. After the research, where we can bring in all our stakeholders, co-create, and get people to lean into our insights and establish that accountability. Some of the other sort of more tactical things that people need to do is establish accountability to report back on the items, right? Like you do evaluative studies, if you're given 20 bugs, after that, nothing. You need to close the loop on what's happening with those 20 bugs that you reported. Remember that study, the operations study I was talking about? While the study was great and it was appreciated, the real impact of that study came when I used the findings from that study to author a white paper along with my PM and Dev counterparts, which spoke about what are the platform and product changes that we can do to drive change, right? So again, your job doesn't end as a researcher. You have to figure out ways to productize your insights. Sometimes it can be white papers, it can be POV documents, it could be, even designs. And most of all, socialize your research at every opportunity. right? So one of the things that we've done previously is after a research study, we take interesting snippets and just keep broadcasting it to the org, right? Once a week. The idea is to build empathy in the org because there's some lowly developer who's sitting at their desk, has no clue about your research, taking an action on, should this be a button, should this be a link, so on and so forth, right? Um, so in summary, go deep to keep that seat at the table. Insights are everywhere if you look for them. Everyone will want to be a part of your field study, and then embrace the product maker mindset. That's my time. Thank you, folks.